Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Executive Table Talk ETT. This is the show where we address the toughest workplace and leadership problems that you're facing with proven experts that are in the trenches getting it done. I am really excited today to talk to Mike Thorne. He's actually a CEO coach, and he's going to be talking us through the 3 ways that CEOs can build accountable teams in 2024. So I want to bring him right up to the stage. Hey, Mike, how's it going today?
Great, JT. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into it, can you tell us your own journey? Because you were a very successful CEO before you hopped to the other side and became a CEO coach. So what led you to become a CEO coach?
Yeah, a lot of my work was around helping companies sort of start scaling after they had sort of stagnated or were looking for new growth. So that was a lot of the work I did. But what I found challenging and frustrating, but also exciting, was I think the way we teach leadership was wearing me. It's all about the P&L, the profit and loss. And I found an evolution of how employees were thinking about it. And you had to spend time on the people listening side of the P&L. And I thought getting into this kind of work would allow me to have a bigger impact than just working in one company. And that's how I got involved with Vistage.
I love it. It's amazing. So we're going to talk about these 3 ways. You and I have had multiple conversations about this. I'm excited for people to hear this. But I want to talk about that challenge, which is they can't get their teams to be accountable for scale. That's what you alluded to. Why do you think you're hearing so much more about this these days? Why is this becoming more prevalent? And why aren't CEOs able to fix it themselves?
There's a couple things. One is coming into COVID and through COVID, the employee base is starting to be more demanding. They want to know why they're doing things. They want to understand what the purpose is. Why do I have to be in the office could be one thing, or why are we doing it this way? And CEOs, especially business owners of small, mid-sized businesses, tend to be control freaks. And when they have control, they feel more control when they have the control, obviously, but unfortunately, it doesn't mean your employees, your leaders are actually take the action you want them to because they're just waiting for you to tell them what to go do. So you got this interesting dynamic where the CEOs don't want to lose control because it's their company, they want to do it their way, yet because they won't give control to some of the employees aren't empowered. And so you have this really frustrating dynamic. And coming out of COVID, there's a lot of growth opportunities for people, but they're not getting traction.
It's so interesting that you say that.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when you and I were talking about this, I said, so for someone that's going to listen to this show today, whether they are a CEO or they're part of an executive team, right? And they can tell that this accountability, this lack of accountability is happening and hurting scale. I said, well, what do you hear? Like, what's something you say? And you told me this, and I want you to expand on it. You said, if you hear a CEO saying something like this, my team is not being resourceful. I'm setting the direction, but everyone still needs my help and aren't able to figure things out on their own. So I get that. I get that that's very clear that that's not scalable. But what's really going on there? What's happening in that moment?
Well, a lot of it is lack of trust. And I don't mean trust that there's lying going on, but it's trust of intentions. And so in a lot of cases, the CEO is just really frustrated, but they haven't taken the time to try to understand what's really going on and what role they're playing in it. And so it's a sort of a cat and mouse game where the employees, the leadership team, they want to stay together, but you could start to see some maybe infighting that's going on underneath. People are trying to do things one-off or talking behind the CEO's back. So meanwhile, he's very frustrated and they don't like to tackle the issues. They just kind of let them linger because if you tackle them, it could cause a lot of confrontation. So it's this never-ending cycle where the CEO's saying we're doing all this. He's not getting the execution he wants. The employees are not feeling empowered, so they're talking behind his back. And it's just never-ending cycle that goes round and round, and everybody's exhausted, frustrated, and tired. And quite frankly, no one's really happy. The business could still be doing well, but it certainly isn't doing as well as it could.
Well, I love that. I love that you're calling that out, right? Even if the business is doing okay, you're talking about this not being scalable, which is what every CEO is looking to do for sure. So Mike, I know that this isn't something that you just preach about. You've actually lived through experiences that really taught you how important it is to, build accountable teams in order to scale through your own CEO experience. And it's all in the canoe story. So will you tell the canoe story to everyone?
Yes, this is September of 2006. I'd been president of Yankee Candle about 3 months. It was my birthday. The leadership team gave me this beautiful framed picture for my birthday. It was a frame of a canoe, and it said, success is a journey, not a destination. It was something I talked a lot about, and I find whenever you're going through a transformation or trying to scale a business, there's bumps along the way, and so I would always have a saying around, hey, success is a journey, it's not a destination. It would tend to calm and settle people down and go, that's right, I forgot about that. Yeah, we're on a journey. Doesn't happen overnight. When they left after giving me all that, the lady, Doran Exford, who was the head of learning and development, she was in there and she said, do you know why they gave you you that picture? Kind of an odd question, but I said, well, no, it's just I use that saying all the time. And she goes, no, I want you to look at the picture and look at that canoe again, which I did. And I said, I don't get it. She goes, where on that picture, Mike, are the oars? And I said, well, there aren't any oars. And she said, well, that's the message, the subtle message you're giving you is that, Mike, they are compliant with you. They understand you're the president. They'll do what you need to go do. They'll comply and get the work done, but they'll never, ever be compelled to give you everything they got. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, your expectations are so high, they can't meet them. You're not sharing with them what the purpose is of what we're doing and where you're trying to take this thing, like the details of it. So they're just going to comply with you. I was like, whew, wow, that really, really stopped me in my tracks. I was like, wow, that caused some internal soul searching at the time to think about, okay, hold on a second, am I really being clear? And if I am, what exactly am I asking to be accountable for? It's a question I don't think a lot of business owners really ask, like, okay, you want to be accountable. What exactly do you want them to be accountable for? And I realized I wasn't clear on that. And that's when my journey began.
I love it. Fantastic canoe story. I will never forget that one, by the way. Fantastic stuff.
I haven't either. It's been 20 plus years, and I still remember that moment of just freezing in my office and going, oh my God, am I the one, like what role, like, wow, that really was and I've thought about every time I work with people these days, and okay, what role am I playing in this?
Okay, Mike, so now we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about the 3 things that CEOs, their executive teams need to be doing to build accountable teams. And I think number 1 is quite interesting. You would think it's obvious, but it isn't. And I need you to expand on that, which is self-awareness of role in the accountability issue. You alluded to it early on, but really get into this for us.
I just feel like, and this is experience I've had over the last 20 years and also working with someone who I think is a subject matter expert on this, Eric Coryell. So often, a lot of business owners and leaders have had some past experience or history that holds them back, and they're unable to really step back and say, is there something that I'm doing? Is there a behavior that I'm demonstrating? Is there a fear that I have that's not allowing me to just get out there and really talk about this openly? And so the idea of having self-awareness is probably one of the most important gifts you can give yourself. But people do have a fear of saying, well, maybe I'm not worthy enough for this role. People refer to it as imposter syndrome. So they're afraid to actually discover it, when reality is, my experience is, it's the greatest gift you could have. It unleashes you once you have discovered it. I had to go through some work when I was at Yankee Candle that lady Dawn Exford helped me with, just taking simple steps. And then once I really discovered what it was that held me back, it unleashed me.
It's really interesting that you say that, because I think to become a CEO, there's an assumption that can be made that you're a very driven person, that you have become aware enough to play to your strengths and to grow, et cetera. But I almost hear you saying that that's the problem, that a CEO is not then self-aware enough, and has probably worked very hard to try to, to be perfect or as close to it as they can, that they don't want to sort of acknowledge that maybe something's going on here. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's just, and it's not, in a lot of cases, what I'm seeing is this command and control style of leadership is now shifting to more purposeful driven leadership. And it's because the generations coming up that are going to be leading these companies, that 35 to 50-year-old leader, that's their expectations. Someone who wrote a book, Chris Tuff, the CEO whisperer, he said to me, he goes, Mike, your generation, I'm 59, said, well, that I'm told I got to do X, Y, and Z, and I got to climb the ladder this way. This generation is like, no, I'm not interested in climbing that ladder. And so I think this command and control thing is driven a lot of these CEOs to be successful. And that's how they got to where they are. But if you really want to take it to the next level and scale this business, you're going to have to get others to help you in that fear of letting go. And like I said, a lot of it could be related to something that happened to them in the past, or they had no success letting go. That is really where they're at in a lot of cases. And we've got to move out of this command and control environment if you're really interested in scaling the business to the level you want to.
I love that. I love that honesty. All right, let's talk about the next step, which is find respected leaders to identify the roadblocks. So what's going on there?
Can I go back to that last question? One more thing I just wanted to touch base on there.
Yeah.
If you're struggling with this idea, well, geez, I don't know what my purpose is. I really don't know what role I'm playing into it, or I don't even know how to begin this process. The one thing that Eric Coryell brought up that I thought was really a good question is think back to a team you participated on. Could be business, could be sports. In my case, it was a high school football team. We went undefeated, won the Super Bowl. But along the way, every practice, you all knew that our goal was to win the Super Bowl. And everybody had what Eric calls a shared fate, or something that we're all something we're going after, a purpose. And so for some of you that are really wrestling with this, that can't think, go back and think about, or a team that you played a role on, or something in your life that was really powerful and you enjoyed it and felt that was really where you wanted to be. Start writing down what those elements were that made that so great. And then ask yourself, does my company do that? Am I leading that way? Do we have this in our company? Would be one exercise to go through as part of the first thing we talked about.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense, right? You go back and connect the dots, recreate the scenario. Beautiful. All right, let's move on. Number 2. All
right. So the second piece is, as you have discussions about this with your leadership team, I think once you declare where you're going and what you're trying to accomplish here, my gut would tell me there's a couple people on your leadership team that are available to talk to you, to give you some perspectives on how to think about getting this done. I call them culture carriers in companies. These are the people that sit on a leadership team, hear the real you, like where you want to go, what this shared fate, as Eric describes it, as this purpose, whatever you're trying to get done. So once you've laid this out and you put it on the table for your whole team, you're probably going to find some people getting uncomfortable because they like this protection of everyone sort of dancing all over the place and doesn't really know where we're going. They kind of like that. It's kind of a weird thing. But there's going to be a couple of people in that group are going to be sitting there going, oh, this is going to be awesome. When that meeting ends, they'll either come to you and say, hey, boss, you got a minute, or hey, coach, you got a minute, or whatever your leadership name is, or whatever they call you. They're going to help you start to navigate this. So I would suggest either giving it a few days after you bring it through your leadership team, see if anybody comes to your office, or if you are in an office setting and you're not doing a virtual, and if you're doing a virtual in a meeting, just see if anybody asks you for a few minutes, or if you're walking around, hey, how did that feel when you heard it? You're going to find a few of those people that can help you start to shape it in a way that people will respond positively to it. Because a lot of times that peer pressure is more important than you pushing it down. So that's just a thought I would say in my career that's happened quite a bit. So I'll give you an example. At Rawlings, a baseball company, was going through a lot of challenges and a lot of issues. And I'm heading in there as a senior VP of sales and customer service and data analytics. And everybody was trying to position themselves to make sure they were not going to get hit over the head with whatever had happened before. A lot of stuff went wrong. And I clarify where we're going. I went through this journey I'm just describing to you. And after I left that meeting, 2 people came to my office and said, listen, you got a minute? I'm super excited about this, but I want to share a couple things that might be helpful to get us there. And it just gave me some really unique insights. It didn't mean that I separated the 2 of them, but I knew the next meeting, how best to frame it, how best to approach the situation, because there are some cultural norms. There's humans, there are just certain behaviors humans have. So those internal people, super helpful to get perspective and context to make sure that you don't go off on a tangent as you're trying to implement something new like this in your company.
I love it. That makes total sense. Great example, by the way. Amazing.
Well, a great example would also be if you just think about, some people are not thinking, I can't relate to that. If you got a favorite movie, mine's Miracle on Ice, great movie. The coach, it was a short-term situation, so he put pressure, which is not always the best way on his team. His whole purpose was they hate the coach, they unify around themselves. But the coolest part of that, as an example of this, is they were getting on a plane just about ready for the Olympics to get started. And I think there were 4 of the players, including the captain, asked the coach to get off the plane. And they wanted to have a conversation with him. And they were basically like, hey, coach, why are you putting a new player on this team? We're like a family. And we've worked 6 months of this thing. And we're all unified behind this thing. And we want to stay with this team and this family. And he kind of looked around. He's like, we're a family. And he kind of walked off, if I remember correctly, didn't really address it, but clearly he got the point that they're ready, they're unified, they'll run through a wall to do whatever they got to go do. That's just an example where 4 players could see what's going on, pull them aside and say, hey, coach. It's just stuff like that. You can watch that movie. That's a good one to kind of give you an example of what it actually is like in a sports environment.
Yeah. I mean, I think so many CEOs have people that are just yes people at that level, right? Yeah. And they tend to plateau. You absolutely need those people that care so much about the business. They're willing to come at you with the stuff that's tough, for sure. I love that. Love it. Yeah. All right, let's talk about number 3, tackle it as a team, all stakeholders required. What do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of times when you are in these environments that we're describing, the command and control, and CEOs frustrated, they'll be in a leadership meeting. The meeting will end, and invariably people go behind everyone's back and they go off and break up in 2s and 3s. They go to lunch, or they get on a Zoom call in today's world, or what have you, and they start complaining, They start talking about the meeting. This didn't happen. That didn't happen. Super ineffective, inefficient, and really constrains your ability to scale and grow the way you want to. So you're really going to have to say to yourself, I want to put on the table the biggest challenges and issues we have in front of the entire group. Typically in these environments, if you're the CEO, listen to this, you probably find yourself picking one or two people you're comfortable with, or you say to the CFO, hey, we got this issue, let's work through it all and bring it to the group. I've seen this in an organization I work with. They're a nonprofit, about 35 million, and they have these Wednesday meetings. And we were getting stuck on this. The CEO was super frustrated, very visionary leader. And the group said, well, the Wednesday meetings are a waste of time. Again, the one or two people in the group that are willing to put themselves out there. And what we uncovered in the conversation was that the CEO, CFO, and the COO would make these choices and decisions and then bring them in the meeting and then kind of act like we're all talking about these issues and how we're going to resolve them. The team underneath, the other leaders knew this was already resolved. So what are we really wasting our time? They would all then leave and start talking about all this behind the back, which meant every meeting they're just showing up just to use the time. An hour and a half meeting, we just got to sit here for an hour and a half, pretend we care about this stuff, go back to our day-to-day because we're not empowered anyway. So why are we doing this? Within 1 month, those meetings have completely flipped. They now have these ideas, they're called mission moments, like moments where people really took accountability and made amazing stuff, or mission challenges were things that were not so great that we got to work on. So in 1 month, just having a conversation about this with a whole group in the room, this is what came out of it. And that's why you got to do it together, because it's going to be an opportunity to really understand what is the roadblock, what is the thing we're talking about. And then over time, as major issues pop up in the business, so you create like a dashboard of metrics and people can start working through them. And the goal would be that the team is working through this. You're not, but they're accountable. So now they're accountable, but you're letting them work through a lot of this stuff, but you got to get on the table as a group.
Okay, there's so much when you just talked about that. First of all the team members must have felt like, I don't matter. I don't count. I'm not seen as capable because decisions were being made by, two higher level people that were just pushing it out. So where's the buy-in, right? I never got a say in how this was going to be done. My opinion was never heard, and they clearly don't value me enough or trust me enough to be able to assist them with this. Like, it's incredible to me when you describe that, but yet how many CEOs or executive teams that are listening to this today are probably guilty of that? Because the thing that you said to me was really interesting. You immediately go to that person that you're most comfortable brainstorming with, or you're most comfortable solving that problem with out of efficiency. And you did that when you were a team of 4, but you can't do it when you're a bigger team, right? It's just, It's fascinating to me.
Well, because part of it is you're afraid there's going to be pushback and that your answer is not going to be the right one. And on the other hand, in a defense, having sat in that seat myself, sometimes you're just frustrated. You just want to get stuff pushed through. And look, at the end of the day, it's your business. You're running the company and you're held accountable by somebody else, a board or investors, or it's your own money. In a lot of cases, it's your own personal money. And you feel, hey, I have the right to make whatever choice I want to make, which is true. It's just at the end of the day, when you have a group of people that are very smart people, and if you give them an opportunity and empower them, it's amazing the thought process that comes in. And they're either going to say, hey, boss, or hey, Jim or Sue, great job. I think that's awesome. I'm all in. I love it. Or they're going to say, hey, a couple of new ideas that you hadn't thought about that I want to add to the table. Or there's a couple of gaps you're thinking because I'm actually living in this day in and day out. You're seeing it from up here. So yes, you see the overarching symptom that's going on that's impacting our operational abilities, like whether it's revenue, EBITDA, whatever you're measuring yourself on. But unless you're really living it every day. So in some cases, and this organization did that, those 2 or 3 people said, you know what, we're going to start to go visit our business units once a month so that we have a real live understanding of what's going on. It completely changed the organization. Now, I will caution people is that just because you empowered them doesn't mean it's going to go great. You're then going to have to say, okay, are they capable? Because the other part of this is, do you have capable leaders, people that believe in your vision? You got to make sure that's the case. Otherwise, you're empowering them and they're not capable, and you got another whole thing. So it's one other thing to be thinking about. But the only way you find that out is to get in their world and live with them for a while.
Yeah, amazing. All right, let's talk pushback, because I think that always happens.
Yes.
I can see 3 scenarios that CEOs are going to push back on this. The first one is this: I don't have time to do this process. What do you say to the CEO that says that?
What I would typically do, I was write down on a piece of paper, I don't know if I can show this, like this. These are the 24 hours in a day. And I would literally just sit with them and I say, okay, let's talk about 8 hours of work. More often than not, they joke and say, well, it's actually 10. Okay, that's 10. 8 hours of sleep, they say, oh, that's a fallacy. You probably get 6. Okay, so that's 16. So what are you doing these other eight hours? And I would say 90% of the time they just stare at you and they realize, okay, time isn't my issue, but it feels like it is. And so the next phase of this is it really time or is it attention? Where are you putting your attention? If it's another 6 or 8 hours a day, and I mean, people come back with, well, I'm watching Netflix for 2 hours. Could be legit stuff. My son has a ball game. My daughter has this. Those are legit things. But I think when they go through a week's time, they realize they have time. It's just a question of where you're putting your attention. And then the second part of this is, how important is this to you? If it's really that important, you will find the time. Because the payback is, and so the second part of the question would be, okay, if this particular situation is not resolved in a year or 2 years, what's the financial implications? What's the emotional implications on for you? What about your personal life? How much? And then they start really, you could even say, well, how much do you charge per hour for your time? Oh, probably $2,000. Okay, so you're telling me you're spending 6-8 hours a week on this particular issue, you're worrying about it at home, driving to work, you're not getting it resolved, times 50 weeks, how many hours is that? And they start processing it themselves, and time suddenly becomes the non-factor.
I love it. Okay, pushback number 2. I can't get people to stop coming to me with the problems.
Yeah, that's a great example of CEOs who command and control. And so I think in that case, because in many cases like that, it's like you're the zookeeper. People just keep coming to you and they just, dump all over your office and you're trying to solve everything. So one of the things that's really will stop people in their tracks and start to get people to learn to no longer be coming to you and just asking you for the solution is to when they come into your office and they start to say, pause, time out. I just want to make sure I'm completely clear on what your expectations are for me leaving this conversation so that I can be present. What exactly are you going to need me from this conversation? Believe it or not, more often than not, the person will stop and pause and just say, well, I just want to make sure you know what I'm doing, or I got this idea. And so it all of a sudden becomes they have to own it. And then each time they come to you, they're going to realize, okay, I got to walk in and not be asking for them to give me the answer. I got to walk in and say, here's my situation. Here's what I'm thinking about as a resolution. And then you as the business owner can say, great, I got it. You're good. Or a couple things to think about. And depending on the seriousness of the situation, you got to let them just run with it. Or you're going to step in and say, hey, let's have a deeper conversation with the whole team. But if you just have them walk in and ask you, you've only got your context. You have 10 things going on in your head. You're not really in a position to be able to answer it all. So you throw your best answer at the time. And more often than not, it might not be. But guess what? If it goes wrong, it's on your head. So just that pause, make sure I understand what you're asking so I can make sure I'm present for what you're looking for, might actually allow them to start coming with more solutions. And again, real tough one, get in front of the group, let them handle it, or you yourself get involved.
Love it. Amazing. All right, last pushback. My team keeps focusing their efforts on the wrong things.
And that goes back to what we started with is, are you really clear on what you're asking him to be accountable for? And this is one that's mind-boggling. And I lived through this. You have simple things. And it's one of those things where you say something as the boss, the owner, the CEO, and everybody interprets it a different way because they have their own life experiences and contexts that are going on. So they hear what you're saying, or the question if it's a question you're asking people or things you want them to go do, they're now saying, okay, what is he really asking? What does he want to do? Because they're trying to protect themselves. It's like human nature. And so that's the other big one that goes on that we have to really be careful about is when you're communicating, people are hearing you different ways.
This was amazing, Mike. Very helpful. Thank you for addressing that pushback. Thank you for giving us the framework. At this point, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people here are thinking that they need to have a deeper conversation to talk about their, situation specifically at their company. So what's the best way for them to do that with you?
For me, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I do majority of my work there. So please just feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to try to help you out however way I can.
I love it. Thank you so much, Mike. So you heard it, folks. If you want to connect with Mike, have a conversation about this, explore this a bit more, please reach out to him on LinkedIn, but also make sure that you let him know that you saw him here on ETT Executive Table Talk, because we need to let him know that you are watching.